Hope you're having a great week so far. I'm excited to tell you about the top 3 news stories of the week because these news stories all have some major headlines that are fueled by data. And I'm a little bit of a nerd. I like data a lot. Data is great sometimes because it can back up big proclamations like the biggest or the highest, and it can prove or disprove theories in an instant. But the reason why I like it as a journalist is it can do that, but then also reminds us what it can't tell us. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Data can tell us a lot and also almost nothing. And I like that riddle in the news. And I think we have to acknowledge the value of both. So here are your top 3 stories I think you should know about this week, the data behind them, and then the questions that the data raises. So the number one data point that I think you should know about and the number one headline is this. The United States is now the world's largest producer of oil. It's the first time we've held that title since 1973. And that, by the way, was the year of the oil embargo. And you might recall seeing some photos of cars in long lines during the 1970s at the gas station. That was the embargo. That's where oil-producing countries decided to cut their exports to us. And it was a strong reminder about America's reliance on foreign oil and how that can make us really vulnerable. So overall, having the title as the world's largest producer of oil isn't a bad thing. In fact, it could be a great thing for America. And right now, it seems to be. But here's the lingering question. When you have a lot of supply of something, the price of it can go down. And some are wondering if other big oil producing countries like Russia or Saudi Arabia will ramp up their production in part to compete with us. If we have a lot of world supply of oil, the price of it can go down. And if the price goes too low, it can actually crater some of these new companies that have developed over the last several years that have helped us increase supply. That can hurt those companies and hurt some of the new jobs that they've added. And so it's something that I'm watching as we move ahead. What does the world supply of oil really look like? And what does that mean for the price of oil? Number 2, a big story here, and also from a major oil producer, which is Russia. Russia this week had the largest military war games since the Cold War. 300,000 troops, and they invited China for the first time, which is a big deal. Russia chose 9/11 to start their games, which, we can all raise a lot of questions about the timing of that, although in the past, Russia has held these games in September. But basically, Russia's trying to show the world who's boss. And they are showing a strategic partnership with China on top of that militarily. So here's what that headline about the war games doesn't tell us. Russia is actually dealing with a lot of domestic protests. And that's because there's a question by the public about what's happening within the government, the corruption, and the economy. Just recently, the protests were about pensions. Basically, the Russian government said to the people, you're not going to get paid what you thought you were going to get paid at the age that you thought you were going to receive it. And so the Washington Post actually had a really interesting article about how the young people in Russia are hitting the streets because their parents are too afraid to do it and too afraid of what could happen to their jobs. So I'm watching that. We don't want to be too distracted by the largest military war game since the Cold War and not pay attention to what's happening inside Russia. Because if Vladimir Putin suddenly has to spend energy domestically to suppress people that are protesting against him, that would be a very big story. So I don't want to let the military show of force disguise what might be really happening inside of Russia. And finally, here's a big headline that we've talked a lot about this week. Americans are now earning the highest household income level ever, just over $60,000. That level has gone up for the past 3 years. But the way that we collect that data has somewhat changed. So there are those that say, well, listen, it's not exactly comparable to previous years, so maybe we should ease up on the highest household income level party. So just consider that. One of the data points in the economy I am really looking at is wages and what's happening with our readings, our data on wages. Every month we get a reading on it, and every month the same debate comes up. Some economists say these wages are not rising fast enough in this economy that is growing and pumping along, as we've just talked about. The Trump administration will say, listen, the wages are fine. The way that we're collecting the data, yet again, doesn't include the tax cuts and doesn't include other things. And so if you include those other variables, wages are great. Some agree with that. Some independent economists agree with that. There are others that say, well, actually, this tells us a lot about the economy. You had a lot of people that haven't been working for a long time. Oftentimes, they don't have high education levels. And so they're just sort of dipping their toe back in the workforce. And when they're doing that, they're just getting paid less. So if you haven't worked for a couple of years and you suddenly get a job at Target, for example, Target's probably not going to pay you top dollar, and they may not even give you full-time work. And so when you have a lot of people that are filling that profile, then that may make wages look suppressed when they aren't, when actually it's a good thing that you have people coming off the sidelines and working. So the big takeaway I want you to know about the data overall when it comes to our incomes and when it comes to wages is that economists across the board are a little bit perplexed about whether or not the data can be trusted and what's really happening in the economy. And that's a reminder about data that I think is really important. And we talked about the limitations of it. Data can tell us something, but it cannot tell us how we feel. And the way we feel about the economy, the way we feel about national security, that really matters for all sorts of reasons. But in general, just our overall happiness and how we're feeling about America. And that's part of the story too. And that's when really good reporting comes in. When you have the data points, but then you talk to people and say, hey, how are you feeling about this? And when you use those two things together, strong reporting from real people and the data, you get a great story. So that's hopefully something we're going to continue to do here at Smarter News. And on that, there are many interesting people in America doing interesting things and starting interesting businesses. And we found a really fascinating entrepreneur in California that has a unique story that we wanted to share. My son, by the way, loves John Wayne. On his birthday, he wanted to watch a John Wayne movie. As we all likely know, there's just something about John Wayne, isn't there? My toddler recognizes it. I recognize it. My dad recognizes it. All generations. His movies have amazing staying power, and so does he, quite frankly. So did you know if you wanted to take a spin cycling class in California, you can take one from John Wayne's daughter? That's right. Marisa Wayne owns and operates several cycling studios called Grit Cycle. She opened her first one about 5 years ago and continues to expand. And although she says she likes the fact that her dad made a movie called True Grit, that wasn't the sole reason for why she named the cycling studio Grit Cycle, although she says it's a nice crossover. And in fact, she's a mom, she's an instructor, she's an entrepreneur, she's John Wayne's daughter. She uses all these different roles to really complement each other. So we talked to her a little bit about everything, and we started with the story few know. Why did John Wayne, her dad, call her Nine Iron?
But I was reading some of your past interviews, and so let me ask you this: why did your dad call you Nine Iron?
I hit him in the head with a 9-iron. We went golfing, and I had never swung a golf club before. I was a tennis player. And he was on location making the sequel to True Grit, Rooster Cogburn. And we were in a place called Sun River, Oregon, that was on this beautiful golf course. And he's just like, kids, let's go hit some balls. So we stepped out there, and my brother Ethan ran over to the next green. And I kept swinging, and I kept missing the ball. And my dad came around, and he put his arms around me. He's like, look, you have to keep your eye on the ball and swing through and follow through. And he made it look so easy. And I'm like, okay. Bam! And I was so excited because I hit something. I thought it was the ball, but I looked down and the ball was still there. And I turned around and my dad was doing this, and then he just fell backwards, and I hit him almost in the temple.
Oh my gosh.
He had a dent in the side of his head the rest of his life. And he had a great sense of humor. And, obviously I was scared to death. I was a young girl, and I thought that I'd really hurt him, and I had. But when he came to, he was making jokes, and he was like, who hit John? And hey, 9-iron, can you bring me a glass of water? So it made me feel a little bit better.
Marisa says that if she had hit her dad in the temple, the doctor said she would have killed him. Yikes. Luckily, that wasn't the case. But she credits her dad and her mom, a passionate tennis player, for developing her love for being active. So what was it like being John Wayne's daughter?
fairly normal to me. We lived outside of the Hollywood scene. We lived down in Newport, which back then was just kind of a really sleepy little community. And people were very respectful. He loved everyone. He loved, going and waving to the boats as they'd come by and walking around the neighborhood and talking to all the neighbors. He was a really social guy. But they respected his privacy. And it wasn't like today with everyone having a camera phone and Facebook and, Instagram. It was a little bit more, I think, civilized to be a movie star, maybe back then. But he would take me to school. He would pick me up from my tennis. He'd come watch when he could. He was sick a lot, so there were a lot of things that he couldn't do. But as far as I'm concerned, it was way more normal than what you see in Hollywood today. Plus, he was older. He was almost 60 years old when I was born, so he wasn't working that much. And when I could, I would go on location with him. He loved having his family around, and he was just a really good, hands-on, loving, doting dad.
John Wayne battled cancer more than once, and it was a nemesis that finally took his life when Marisa was just 13 years old. And John Wayne's dying wish included using his popularity to help others.
When he died, he said, "Kids, if my name is good for anything, it'd be great if you could help people that have cancer and do something with the name to help people so they don't have to go through what we've gone through." And my brother Michael started the John Wayne Cancer Foundation, and we also have the John Wayne Cancer Institute, which is a facility up at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica where we have doctors and researchers and scientists. And then we have the foundation, which funds some of the programs there and other programs too.
Marisa uses her cycling studios to also help raise money for the John Wayne Cancer Foundation. Living a healthy lifestyle, she says, is part of cancer prevention, though she also likes simply providing a special place for her community to come work out.
It's an indoor cycling class, spin. We go to the beat of the music. It's non-competitive. It's very supportive, very motivational. We have all levels. It's dark with blue lights and great music. We have audio, and you just go into that room and you lose yourself for 45 minutes. And it's a very safe, comfortable, motivating environment. And my partner, Matt Bourne, and I worked together at another studio and knew that we wanted to break off and do our own thing. And it was just kind of organic, just kind of happened. And then we had all these people that came on board, and now here we are 4 studios later with, a great team in place and changing the community for the better.
And by the way, we shouldn't ignore the fact that you haven't just founded the business and run the business, but you also teach classes. So someone could come and get a class from John Wayne's daughter in a place called Gridside. I mean, it's really cool. That's really cool. Why is it important for you to continue to teach the classes and be part of the business in that way?
I love it. I love music. I love when someone comes up to me and says, "You made my day. I can go handle my life now. I've been going through this." And we had a woman email us the very first day that we were open in Long Beach, and she'd gone through a very traumatic situation and had been looking for something more than physical, more of a mental therapy. And she sent us this email. I'm getting chills right now, saying that she found it. She's hook, line, and sinker day one. And so it really means a lot when people come up and say that. And that was a different instructor. I'm just happy that we have all these wonderful instructors.
I had read that John Wayne loved the news, so I couldn't help but ask Marisa, would her dad like Smarter News?
I think he would. He loved reading. He loved all news sources. And he, as conservative as he was, he loved getting into a good, intelligent discussion with a liberal. He admired somebody that believed in, or that stood for what they believed in, whether or not they agreed with him or not.
Yeah.
So he really liked that mental stimulation. He was very smart, very sharp.
I can't wait to tell my son that. Mommy's running a business that John Wayne would totally like.
Definitely.
So give me 5 minutes, just 5 minutes.
Let's be honest, I'm never going to get that 5 minutes, but we will all do our best, right? We will continue working on the headlines for you over at Smarter News. And if you have any story ideas or just want to talk to us, which we would love, you can email us info@smarternews.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for spending a little time with us. We really appreciate it. I'm Jenna. This is Smarter News, and have a great day wherever you are.